Hello everybody, Maven here. Now forgive me if I'm sort of sounding a bit off or whatever. I've got a chest infection, so I might have to keep pausing and playing, so I can cough off the microphone. But this might surprise you, it might not, I don't know. But I don't listen to other people's wrestling podcasts pretty much ever. I mean, I'm in enough. So some would say more than enough, actually, quite frankly, and therefore I don't feel the need to fill my free time to basically listen to the same topics that I've already covered or I've already talked about on my channel or the other channels with my co-hosts. So that goes for everybody. It goes for Conrad Thompson shows, Jim Cornette's, Chris Van Vliet's, etc., all the way down to all the random wrestlers who do these weekly podcasts for absolutely no viewers. But so once again, I'm sort of wrestled out because I punch in at 9 and then punch out at whatever time I can, quite frankly. But this is also true for 6 Feet Under with Mark Calaway, despite it being one of the biggest shows on YouTube, especially in the wrestling YouTube space during its initial run. However, when it comes to researching, I do watch clips from all over. So I'm not watching the full shows, but I am watching clips, including the people I mentioned above. So I'm more than familiar with all of the main shows out there, especially the viewership numbers, because I actually keep tabs on all these things. And it is a testament to how well the Undertaker's protected his character over these past 30 or so years, and just what an enduring and popular character The Undertaker still is with fans to be achieving the numbers that he did on the original podcast. We're talking up to and around 25 million YouTube views per month. Just in 1 month alone, they achieved that. So just to give you an idea, on YouTube at its peak, 6 Feet Under with Mark Calaway was doing roughly the numbers of all WSI shows, Maven's channel, and Jim Cornette's views combined. Even more amazing when, in my opinion, I didn't even think it was all that great, the Mark Calaway shows, but, I mean, I thought it was shot well, and there was good stories in it, but I kind of never really thought, I sort of worked out why The Undertaker didn't speak all those years. He's not like the most compelling talker, but there was some, good stuff in it as well. But it also seemed like fairly novelty-driven, hearing Taker speak so candidly after 30 years plus of silence. But at the time, there were also numerous complaints and praise as well for Undertaker's co-host, Matt. Now, keep this in mind because I'm going to be bringing this up later. Now, at some point, maybe at the beginning of the year, I think it was around March time, The Undertaker just stopped posting content on YouTube and stopped recording new material. Well, I didn't know why. Nobody seemed to know why. It seemed to be, very few people anyway. But thanks to Maven, a couple of weeks ago, he actually interviewed Undertaker's old co-host, Matt, and we found out that The Undertaker basically sold the rights to the podcast without informing Matt to WWE. And then he removed Matt from the podcast entirely. Now, Matt was very gracious in his interview with Maven and even claimed that Taker probably kept the podcast going an extra 6 to 8 months. In fact, let's just listen to it.
We have to talk about how you found out you were no longer going to be a co-host of 6 Feet Under. How did it happen?
So we just got done filming one of my heroes in the sport, Jake the Snake Roberts, and Diamond Dallas Page, who I've been friends with for a while. And they came in, we filmed, we batch shoot. The last episode that we shot that day was me and Mark talking.
Yeah.
And which was going to be the first episode of that kind of group that would go out. Yeah. So we do that, we get done. I do what I always do. Man, how's everything going? How's the wife, kids, all that stuff? How's the home? And he goes, I really want to talk to you about some stuff. I was like, okay. I thought that he was about to tell me, I'm done.
You thought he was going to quit altogether, which is too much.
I thought he was just going to be like, hey man, LFG, everything else, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm too much on my plate. Yeah. He's like, hey, the podcast is going to be taken over by WWE and all. That's what, we're going to move in that direction.
So this was news to you?
Yeah.
You had no clue?
No clue at that point. No, I was like, so I'm assuming that this is the end of my run on this. And he goes, yeah, unfortunately. I was like,
but wait a minute, you're part owner, correct?
This is the most interesting bit, by the way, is you're part owner, and then Matt says yes and no. So I don't even know what to glean from that, whether he gets money from WWE, but anyway.
No, yes. I mean,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Because at the end of the day, he's still my friend.
Yeah.
And, we're sitting
and nothing's going to change that.
Absolutely not. Not on my end, anyway.
I hate the guy for what he did to you. No, I'm kidding.
Anyway, okay, we'll leave it there. Right, so I found that particularly interesting. It's like, yes, are you the co-owner or whatever, and I don't know, something screwy's gone on there with the business. I do want to comment on it more, but I wish I had more information. But anyway, he said that later on, I'll just do the rest of it for you, that Taker probably kept the podcast going 6 to 8 months longer than he wanted to because of Matt. Now, that's kind of a bizarre thing to say. So let's assume it's 8 months longer, right, than Undertaker wanted to carry on. But the show itself ran for 13 months. So that means The Undertaker was sick of doing the show 5 months in, yet continued to do the podcast out of loyalty. Who gets sick of it? I mean, I'd understand if it wasn't a massive success. You'd get sick of it. Now, I'm going to tell you, I think I said it somewhere else recently, I've got an idea how much The Undertaker was making on the best days. Just an idea, but I'm going to give you the number in a second. But here's the thing. Why was The Undertaker unhappy doing the podcast with Matt? Because apparently they're friends, they still are friends, and quite frankly, the show was outrageously lucrative. I estimate the show was bringing in, $400,000 per month. Probably could have been more, in fact, as well. That's $5 million per year. So, earnings that, only one in every 1 million, or practically, can ever dream of. And all that is this sitting on your ass talking for 1 day a month, because I think they recorded several, in a batch, in a block, and then pay production to finish the rest, including the thumbnails and uploading and everything else. So, something else is going on here. And now I'm going to put my tinfoil speculating hat on and say that The Undertaker is completely under the thumb of his wife, Michelle McCool. Or that he's at least using his mammoth influence within WWE to essentially canonize his wife in WWE lore, despite the fact that she was, in the grand scheme of things, not a remotely big deal even at the time. Laycool was mildly entertaining at periods, and that was more because of Layla, because she cut more of the promos than McCool did, because Layla was a better promo. And then there was the Mickie James storyline that was just depressing. And also Layla and Michelle were mentors for Low-Key in NXT for about 40 seconds. That's about it. That's the sum total of a career, and I don't even think I'm being unfair with that. There's several reasons why I say this. One, The Undertaker, when announcing the induction of Triple H into the WWE Hall of Fame, pretty much admitted that he was either the head or on the committee of people who chose who was going into the WWE Hall of Fame this year. And maybe next year and last year as well. Go watch the video back. It's Taker looks at Shawn Michaels and says, "Because we are the most tenured guys here, we made an executive decision to induct you, Triple H, into the WWE Hall of Fame." So I'm figuring the Hall of Fame committee is Taker, Shawn, maybe Triple H, maybe Stephanie, maybe Nick Khan, maybe The Rock. That's about the core group, I suspect. I mean, and the reason why I'm throwing The Rock in is because Leah Maya-Via is in the WWE Hall of Fame. I think it was this year or last year she was inducted. I can't remember which one. And it wasn't even like a legacy induction like Ivan Koloff or Kamala or Dory Funk Sr. People who've actually done things in the wrestling business other than, I guess, tank the Hawaii territory. And also threaten somebody. I don't know if anybody knows the story, but apparently I know. Leah Maya-Via and I think her booker at the time, I don't know if it was Lars Sullivan, ended up trying to extort somebody for money because somebody else was trying to run a wrestling show on the islands. But anyway, I bring all this up because it seems that around the time The Undertaker was looking to wrap up with Matt on the 6 Feet Under podcast with Mark Calaway, that's also important, Michelle McCool was all of a sudden announced for the Hall of Fame. And then all of a sudden Michelle McCool was replacing the eminently more qualified Mickie James on the WWE LFG show that nobody watches. And then all of a sudden Michelle McCool, who I'd wager practically nobody remembers the first thing about her short career with WWE, is now labelled as a pioneer women's wrestler. Nothing could be further from the truth. Then all of a sudden Taker, who wanted out from podcasting 8 months before he actually got out of podcasting, tells Matt that he's selling the podcast to WWE, pretty much from under his nose, from what that interview with Maven tells me. And then just a short while later, The Undertaker wasn't sick of doing podcasts after all. He was getting... The Undertaker's wife was now being the co-host and, the new WWE Hall of Famer and all that kind of thing. So not only is Michelle replacing Matt, but making the newly renamed 6 Feet Under with The Undertaker podcast 1,000 times less listenable at the same time. So under Matt, the show was mostly, road stories and whatnot. So with Michelle now at the helm, it's now a far more awkward, stunted, married couple show where Michelle incessantly talks like her career was in any way comparable to her far more famous husband's. Now, the dynamic is also completely ruined, or at least changed, you could say, because The Undertaker is hardly going to be retelling road stories, or the best road stories, with the boys when he was single and had fun in front of his wife. So Taker seemingly also talks less freely, as far as I can see, and as far as other people who watch have said. And it's like the Mr. and Mrs. McCool show, trying to gear the podcast towards women like total divas now, with a domestic lifestyle slant which nobody asked for. And now, because it's an official WWE podcast, this means that Taker will feel even further restricted in what he can and cannot talk about, or maybe even opinions he may or may not feel comfortable sharing, other than, let's say that he was an independent podcaster with Matt. But then, brought to you by Fanatics, of course, now with WWE, or maybe not, because The Undertaker is, of course, a WWE loyalist till the end, so we don't know how much that will sort of change the content or what he's comfortable talking about. But the reason I bring all this up once again is because it all came to a head a couple of days ago when The Undertaker and Michelle McCool got on a podcast and started reading out mean tweets or mean comments about the show. Now, The Undertaker actually did this format once with Matt in 2024, but the Michelle McCool version of calling people trolls who don't like her being part of the show came across as particularly out of touch, especially when The Undertaker defended McCool's presence on the show. So, after one fan left a comment about how they hated the co-host switch, and it's not just one comment. If you go to any video on the WWE version of 6 Feet Under, the full episodes at least, and I've scanned through pretty much all of them, every single top comment with the most likes is, Michelle is ruining the show, I can't get through this, she is interjecting and whatever else, bring back Matt. Every single one of them. So, once again, a commenter that they read or quoted said essentially she's dragged the show down to a level where it's unwatchable. And The Undertaker responded thusly, and I'm going to read this, verbatim, "Look, this is where we're at. This is the direction I wanted to take the show. Whether you like it or don't like it, I do this, we do this for fun. And if you get entertained, then be entertained. If you're not entertained, you don't like it, this is, America, and you get to do whatever you want. So just relax and enjoy the ride." I mean, yeah, fine. But already, a lot of people have seemingly already dropped watching from the show, from their weekly rotation. And even when they aren't, reading out mean tweets about Michelle's neck, for example, they're doing this weird defensive thing straight away. So instead of wanting to improve or maturely address the very valid criticisms, they do the "don't watch then, we're already rich, it doesn't make any difference to our bottom line." So hardly man of the people kind of response. So apparently you have to accept Michelle McCool's presence, and for the people who haven't watched, by the way, Michelle is constantly and unwantedly interjecting herself into conversations between people you actually want to hear interact with each other, like The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker and Kurt Angle, The Undertaker and Gunther, etc. 6 Feet Under now has the vibe of watching John Lennon and Chuck Berry jamming, only for Yoko Ono to start making dolphin noises about halfway through. That being said, I cannot understand how Taker could have been unhappy generating like $5 million a year recording once a month with his supposed friend. I mean, talk about looking a gift horse in the mouth here. And say what you want about Matt, some people liked him, some people didn't, but Taker ditched his co-host Matt, who steered the conversation to basically what wrestling fans wanted to hear from a wrestling show, wrestling. Now, here's another point. The show is now a lot harder to find, and I mean a lot harder. So it's part of WWE's own YouTube channel now, like T-Series, right? It's got 111 million subscribers, and that channel can post upwards of 20 videos or even more in a single day, depending on if there's a Raw or a SmackDown or a pay-per-view broadcast the same day or the day before. The video version of 6 Feet Under now gets lost in the shuffle and does about the same numbers from when it was on a channel with, quote-unquote, just 750,000. So what's that? Not even 1/100th. It's like 140th of the subscribers. Now, the new podcast feed is also more difficult to find. I genuinely couldn't find it at first because I don't know why, because it's the 6 Feet Under with Mark Calaway, independent podcast, comes up first when you search for it. But if you're confused, it's now the 6 Feet Under with the Undertaker podcast, and it's the one with 2.5 stars out of 5 reviews, where everybody's basically making the same criticism as they did what I read up just before. So, I mean, at some point, I kind of think you just have to kind of take the hint here. Michelle McCool is ruining the show. And it might not even be because she's a bad co-host or anything. It's because it's The Undertaker's wife, and therefore he's going to react completely differently to if he was talking to a male friend. Anyway, one of two things has happened here. WWE offered millions for The Undertaker to drop mat and jump ship. And it would have to be millions for it to make sense. So if it's generating $5 million a year, and let's say that he and Matt were co-owners, basically, and they split all profits. And let's go nuts here and say that $1 million went to production. How $10,000 couldn't go to, well, 20 or 30 probably went to production, really. And they were splitting the best part of, 2.5 million each a year, or that year, when it was doing that well. Anyway, WWE and Fanatics or whoever else would have to offer a gargantuan amount of money to offset that for The Undertaker to make it worth as well. Or it's maybe more likely, in my opinion, that Michelle getting into the WWE Hall of Fame and then WWE LFG and now becoming his podcast co-host, all in the span of a few months, by the way, was all just Michelle pushing for all this behind the scenes? Was she pushing for all this behind the scenes all along, and did Taker just basically bend the knee and let it all happen? And my guess is kind of on the latter, to be perfectly honest. Once again, pure speculation on my part, but I think Michelle... this is another thing that I'm speculating on. I think Michelle got the horn for once again appearing in front of the camera during, if you remember, a couple of years ago, I think maybe the network was still up, the Undertaker's final active years. There was a 6-part documentary series of the Undertaker's final few years, and they keep thinking it's almost like false finish after false finish, where he's done and then he's not, and then he's done and then he's not. She was on camera an awful lot during that 6-part documentary series. Too much, quite frankly. And once again, I think that she might have just enjoyed being on camera, and then she wanted to be on camera full time again with WWE. And look, I'm married. I'm sure a lot of you watching this are also married, and probably a lot of you will agree with me on this, is that you want a separation of church and state, or in this case, a separation of married life and work life, because you just want that to be somewhat defined. You want your own thing, you want your own time, you want to be able to be yourself in a different way that you are with your spouse. But once again, a happy wife is a happy life, essentially. So, is The Undertaker simply under the thumb and ruining his show basically to keep Michelle happy? I mean, it could be secret option number 3 as well, quite frankly. Is The Undertaker the kind of guy to organise a boys' outing and then be the only one to bring his wife along? I mean, it could well be that as well. So, I don't know what's going on there. Basically, they've ruined the podcast, they've ruined the show, and they seem to not care either. So, essentially, they've got their money, The Undertaker's wife's happy, and that's basically the bottom line for them, which is kind of fine way to look at it as well if you're the host and you just want to keep everybody happy. I mean, but it's kind of at the expense of wrestling fans who really enjoyed the show and now have basically given up. So anyway, let me know in the comments, is there anybody who thinks that the Undertaker podcast has actually been improved by Michelle McCool taking over Matt? You let me know. I'd be fascinated if someone genuinely thinks that's the case, because if you look at their own comments, nobody agrees with that. Let me know. Please subscribe. Please give us a like, all that kind of thing. It's good for the algorithm. And I'll see you for the next video.